Hey Miber here, sorry. Hey mongrels, Guogamesh here. The Fate Collab brings us another new character with Gilgamesh, this time a unit handmade for Saber, and he boosts her power by such a high amount that you'll think you're in Britain. We'll check out why he's so good for her, his Eidolons, and then talk builds for Lycon's teams. Saber still isn't going to be among the top DPS at equal investment, but she's much better, and if you want to use her again viably, you'll need Gilgamesh. Anyways, like and sub if this guide helps you out at all, and let's begin. Gilgamesh is all about stacking up interest to act as much as possible and stacking up energy gains to ult as much as possible. When another ally takes action, Gilgamesh will gain a point of interest, which will give him a 10% speed buff. 10 interest is 100% speed, for example. After using his skill, he will clear his interest, needing you to stack it up again through various means. Now, because he's Gilgamesh, he has to be annoying, and this interest will actually also lock his kit. It's gimmicky, but basically he will be an autoplay basic spammer until you hit 10 interest for the first time, in which he locks his basic and can only skill. Like my day, but you get to press the button. But what is also hidden in this talent is a semi-new mechanic. If you haven't seen anything about the new Fate characters or my Rin video, then welcome to dual character joint attacks, a pretty fun mechanic for the unit bundling the game loves to do. Anyways, when Gilgamesh or Saber attack, perfect since he can self-buff speed and attack a lot, the tally above Gilgamesh will increase. At 8 stacks, we will get a joint follow-up attack which hits for a total combined 1000% multiplier or 5000 in a 5-target fight. What the hell? Gilgamesh then gets 3 interest, which is whatever, but the real source of this joint attack is this disgusting Saber buff, where she'll receive not only 120 fixed energy straight up, but also a 2 times undiluted multiplier to her next ultimate. I can't even be mad because of how fun this rage bait animation is. So interest lets him take turns, and on his turns he will skill, which is a blast attack ability that doesn't consume SP. How kind of him. He is thus SP neutral to even slightly positive depending on if you managed to get to 10 interest before his first turn or not. This skill will also give himself King's Acknowledgement, which is the 30% def ignore buff. Then we have his ultimate, an AoE attack followed by 10 bounces, literally the same as Saber outside of multipliers, and it's incredibly satisfying bonking a single enemy with their ults combined back to back. Now this ult has a stupidly high cost of 360, also like Saber, so how exactly are we getting that? Well, his A2 saves the day, with a very neat mechanic that will let him regenerate a fixed 30% amount of energy consumed whenever an ally uses an ultimate. So if an ally has an ult cost of 130, Gilgamesh gets 39. Saber's 360 cost gives him 108. Remember though, that is fixed, so ERR will not help us out for even more sadly. This A2 also gives him even more interest stacking based on ultimates, reinforcing the ult spamming team playstyle he loves. For his other passives, his A4 just gives him a permanently stacking crit damage buff after gaining interest. Basically, he just gets 150 crit damage, nothing complex here. His A6 then thought that wasn't enough and gives all allies a 20% attack and 20% crit damage buff, including for himself. But if said ally's max energy is above 140, we get a further scaling buff to attack and crit damage, up to a possible 100% of each at an energy cost of 240. His kit on paper is very simple and very strong for Saber. 120% crit damage, 120% attack, a 2 times undiluted multiplier to her ults every now and then, and 120 energy here and there. But that's just buffs, and he actually ends up forming a dual DPS comp with her and deals about the same damage as Saber if the buffer you bring isn't hypercarry focused. It's not like Rin where she has a tactical nuke, but it's limited to once in a fast run. Gilgamesh is going to be 40 to 50% of the damage share versus Rin's 10 to 15%. So, not only are we giving a kingly boost to our king, but the other king is also doing king level damage, giving us 4 kings in reality. But the previous clunkiness of Saber did not change, and Gilgamesh in fact adds more with his joint attacks, 120 energy, and his own speed clunkiness. Now you need to make sure to time ults correctly for her core resonance, but you'll also need to make sure you don't waste the energy gifting Gilgamesh gets. But also you might want to keep track of Meshi's turns from his speed. And then there's the joint attack on top you want to time well. So whilst the theoretical upgrade is godly, good piloting is mandatory for high potential. Then we have Rincha, which is stronger whilst being easy to play. Oh well. Anyways, let's check out his Eidolons real quick before builds. E1 is a pretty big one, with him first granting the whole team the 30% Death Ignore effect from his skills buff. He then grabs himself an extra 60% attack as well as more energy every skill. This E1 helps him feel much better in his teams, including main DPS, and helps him feel decent in quirky teams that we'll see later. E2 then boosts interest generation, makes him faster from the get-go, and increases his skills multipliers by a decent amount. E4 is then just some energy regen, but he has a lot of fixed energy gains, so we move on to the E6, which again gives him a multiply increase, but this time to his ultimate. Speaking of the ult, we also get a mega crit damage buff to it based on stacks, which he gains from teammates using ultimates. And finally, we get E6's signature 20% res pen buff, but it's to the whole team. So here are my Eidolon simulations for Gilgamesh in a Saber team. The E1 is a nice vertical to grab if you feel like you want more from the duo, and then you gotta wait until E6 for any gigantic boost. It's similar to Saber, where her E6 is the real deal, sadly. So now moving on to builds with Relics first. For Relics, his 30% innate Death Ignore and the fact that his ideal partner is Molten Axe Blade leads us to consider the Genius set even versus non-Quantum Weak, with Quantum Weak making it even nicer. However, I understand it might be a pain to farm and Blade might be better used on other teams. So you can go for boring old Scholar, but also running 2-piece crit sets is completely fine. It's much less of a difference compared to most characters who have a god set made for them. Also, Juke works, as the joint attack is a follow-up. The follow-up hits 4 times, maximizing its effects into 2+ targets, but remember that it will therefore fall off into a single target, and also remember that you can't run this as a main DPS unless, like, E2 Blade. Now, that's all for his damage, but I'm not gonna lie, Eagle felt much nicer in some fights in practice. That joint attack is so ridiculous for both battering and boosting Saber's damage, and it also does a ton of damage on its own. Without it, the team feels slow, especially with the sustain, even with Gilgamesh getting big self-speed buffs. You'd still build for damage, but having him act an extra time in cycle breakpoints can make the difference. More actions is also more ults in a longer fight, giving more cores yet again to Saber, whilst also providing charges for the joint attack. Because of how finicky his interest speed buff is, you can technically hit way above 200 speed in a turn, but does that mean you're necessarily 200 effective speed during the whole cycle 0? Not really. Remember as well that he gains speed based on ally actions, and so that means you can be at 160 speed for part of his action value, then 170, then 180, and so even if you had like 20 interests before his whole turn wasn't at 300 speed. Basically, some extra actions can still be gained with Eagle, and if you hate Eagle, well then at least speed can be useful in some cases, and Vonuak likewise. Speaking of planars, again, damage-wise, we can rock the new Cosmic set made for high-energy characters, or in a Saber team, we can easily just stick with Izumo, they're both destruction units after all. City of Converging Stars is actually really funny because, again, we have a follow-up with Saber, meaning we get its full effect and also buff both DPS in the team. For main stats, we will rock a crit rate chest, attack boots with cases allowing for speed, damage % orb, and an attack % rope. Most of his energy is fixed just like Saber's, and energy regeneration rate does not affect fixed energy. We'll aim to hit 100% crit rate in combat. We get a gazillion crit damage from his self buffs already, but you'll still grab some crit damage and attack. For speed, most players will likely want to go base speed, but 120 for Vonuak is possible too, and for specific runs, people might put speed on him to hit breakpoints more consistently, rather than relying on fluctuating speed. Now, his weapon of choice, Gilgamesh and Cogs. Sorry. His signature, I Am As You Behold, first offers him an 18% attack and 10% energy regen rate buff. It then gives him a 72% damage buff to his ultimates, and then it gives all allies 24% crit damage. Similarly to Rin's, it buffs the wearer a ton and also helps out the team as well. But despite him being half the damage at times, the attack and crit damage isn't too impactful for his damage. Mostly the ult damage is, but it won't buff his skills or joint attack, which are still like 40% of his damage. And the energy regen is small enough to not even impact his rotations. As for the team amp, Rin's gives Death Ignore, whereas this one gives crit damage, a stat that Saber already gets a ton from herself and now Gilgamesh. So this cone isn't needed at all. Generic destruction cones like On the Fall of an Aeon, Secret Vow, the Enforced Battle Pass cone, Under the Blue Sky all work just fine. Here they all are in a Saber team. Even as a main DPS, I don't think his Sig is impactful either because his best comp is Ashblade, which is a triple DPS team, all doing a bunch of damage. And so on the topic of teams, let's dive into them. Despite having a joint attack tied to a Saber, his kit is at least slightly more open to buffing others than Rin's is. The standard Gilgamesh Saber team will be composed of the 2 kings plus Huohuo, the good sustainer 4.x so far, and then your choice of buffer. This can be Triby DDD, Morton X Blade, RMC, Robin, etc. Some can give Saber more turns for better team rotations. Some might not be able to, which can mean you might want some speed or advance on Saber, sometimes also Gilgamesh. She does get the advance from hitting her energy cap, but getting her that turn to use her enhanced basic to then open up the next advance is crucial, and an extra turn in a breakpoint is really impactful sometimes for a possible joint attack. Anyways, the best slots here are Morton X Blade or Remembrance MC. Morton X is just him, but the extra synergy between him and the team is that he spams ults quite often for core resonance and interest stacking. As a team-wide buff, he also works exceptionally well with the duo, as Gilgamesh is just as competent as Saber damage-wise. As for RMC, their energy into Memcharge synergy is at its highest in this composition thanks to how much energy both Saber and Gilgamesh generate. Saber generates a ton from her core resonance, which when ulting converts Gilgamesh energy as well. Flop in Huohuo for team-wide energy and RMC ults for more mem charge. I'm also like Robin, both are attack scaling carries, and they need the extra actions from Concerto sometimes, I'm not gonna lie. With E1 and E2 being much more common in accounts thanks to the Golden Companion shop, she is a pretty powerful unit here. If you're willing to run Gilgamesh as a DPS, well, he can make use of the Ashblade duo better than a lot of carries thanks to his attack frequency, which Ashblade will help a ton with as well, as they'll stack up interest a ton. His decent team-wide buffs at E1 can help boost the whole squad too, where his Death Ignore is perfectly made to hit 100% with the full team. But this is just running the strongest duo out there and calling it a carry team, and he doesn't have many obvious synergies that lead me to believe that he's a permanent resident of the Ashblade retirement home. The DPS of this team has to be cracked to be a better replacement over a premium or a buffer that can boost both carries, or else you can just remove that DPS and get a better performance. He can, of course, run a more standard carry team too, but don't expect anything crazy even with E1. If you want to choose the stronger free main DPS, it would be Archer. Of course, if you have Archer already, then you can pick between his vertical or a new unit that is mostly big for Saber alone. And if you like him, then just feel free to go for him. Anyways, a proper video on this topic should be coming if I have the time. There are also finally weird pairing synergies you could do with his maximum possible buff of 120% attack and crit damage. You technically can buff a high energy carry like Aglaya or Evanesia, but the former has a ton of attack already, and the latter doesn't care for attack. Their teams also might not necessarily work with or buff up Gilgamesh. The idea is that they can battery him like Saber, or even better considering their faster turns or better energy gen, but after trying it, it feels pretty cope and would need E1 on him to even feel fine. He is obviously not intended for this spot with this Saber-centric kit, and so picking him or even pulling E1 for this spot is fun, but I do not recommend it. But let me know what you end up doing with your Gilgamesh in-game. If this video helps you out, I hope you can help me out too with a like, sub, and share, but regardless, thank you for watching. Thanks to my mongrels, I mean YouTube members, and have a Goba day.